Well, we were finishing up on lesson 65, the holy island of Lindisfarne. And we found that Lindisfarne was holy because there was a monastery full of monks that lived on that island. And the island was so secluded that it was a tidal island, which means you only could get out there certain times of the day when the tide was in. But it was a beautiful island. And so everyone knew that that was the holy island where all the monks went and gathered there in that area, and they copied the Gospels. They also did a lot of other things of art and science and studying the Word of God and bringing the gospel. We know some of them came out of the island at certain times and just went and helped people in the community and also presented Jesus to them. So it was a wonderful, wonderful time actually in those years. And we're talking about the years of the 600s. But then we got down to 793. Well, what happened in the year 793? Some not too good things happened. It's when the Vikings were there. The Vikings were from Scandinavia on the English coast, and they started raiding England. And they could care less about the monks there. And so they would attack, and they attacked Lindisfarne. In 875, the monks had to abandon it out of fear, and they brought those beautiful gospels, those Lindisfarne gospels, with them when they left. So it was a terrible time in history, as I said before, because a lot of the monks got killed in the midst. But later on, we see these same Vikings. When you think of Vikings, I think of, Eric the Red and Leif Erikson and them. They were like pirates. We see them coming to Jesus. The monks had an influence on them, but mainly Jesus Christ, the gospel, influenced them. So they abandoned in 875 AD. Then, about 100 years later, in 960 AD, a priest named Alfred in Durham, he wrote the first English translations of the Gospels, the four Gospels. Remember, I told you that they were in Latin. And of course, England back then, the Anglo-Saxons and such, they didn't speak very much Latin and had to learn Latin. So it was hard when you had a Bible that was basically translated in Latin, in the Latin Vulgate, which was good because actually the Gospels were first written in Greek, in ancient Greek. So now they're being translated. When the first translations was in 960, and it was by a priest named Alfred, because he wanted to relate to these people the gospel. In 800, going back a little bit, 800, around that time, the monks created another Gospels with the four Gospels, similar to Lindisfarne. These are the two famous ones. It was called the Book of Kells. Now, they're not really sure where the Book of Kells came from. They think that it may have came from one of the islands, maybe Iona, one island, but they're not sure. And then some say, well, maybe it came from the Irish monasteries in Ireland. But right now we know this beautiful manuscript is in Dublin, Ireland. And you could go and see it. And it's similar to the Lindisfarne with the beautiful paintings and the beautiful first big letters as the monks did. So now we still have those two famous Gospels copied from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. In 731, there was a priest, Bede, and he wrote something that was very spectacular. He wrote the ecclesiastic history of the English people, the first history that recorded all of this. That's how we know what happened back then, because he wrote down the history of England, the beginning of the history of England. Now, it's come to find out it's 731 AD, which is a long time ago. And he wrote about Julius Caesar coming there and the Romans being there. He probably wrote about the bathhouses, I don't know. And he wrote about Augustine, not the Hippo, not Augustine of Hippo, but the other Augustine that came with the 40 priests, and wrote about parts, mainly England, maybe some about Ireland too. I don't know, I haven't read it, but what a neat thing to have one of the first history books there. So, when we're talking about England and Ireland and Wales and Scotland a long time ago, we're talking about history, and we're talking about the first gospel, the good news to go out in the midst. At that time, it wasn't so wrapped up so tightly in Catholicism and the Catholic Church. The monks were bringing the Bible with them where they went, and meeting the people in a humble way, that way of loving the people and serving the people. It was different than later on what happened in the church, as they probably had got lukewarm. But also, we find a lot of these monks doing scientific discoveries, and you can read about those in your science book, because they were kind of secluded from the rest of the people. So they had time on their hands to do those things they felt that God wanted them to do. So the holy island of Lindisfarne. I would like to go there sometime and see that, wouldn't you? But you had to get in before the tide came out, right? Before the tide came in, And what a beautiful place on top of that beautiful mountain there. You can see the palace there, and you can see all around, almost Scandinavia. How spectacular is that?